Bulgaria braces for further political instability as no clear winner emerges from the general elections. It all comes against a backdrop of growing frustration over what many see as a fruitless EU membership. Bulgaria, the poorest country in the European Union, and its quest for political stability and economic prosperity. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shakun Tilasantharan. It's the poorest nation in the European Union and threatens to be one of the most unstable. The centre-right GERB party has secured most of the votes in this election, but they're still short of the majority needed to form the government. Its main challenger, the Socialist Party, BSP. The inconclusive result and low voter turnout are a reminder that many Bulgarians are deeply unhappy with the politicians and the direction the country is going in. Tens of thousands were out on the streets earlier this year, angry about rising poverty, corruption and falling living standards. This 6 years after it joined the EU. Almost a quarter of Bulgarians now live below the official poverty line. The economy barely grew last year. Foreign investment has slumped and unemployment is rising. There's no doubt about the huge problems that Bulgaria faces. And after this election, many questions remain about who can fix them. So who are the main players in this election? There's the frontrunner, GERB, or Citizens for the European Development of Bulgaria. This centre-right party of former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov appears to have won the most votes. Its main challenger is the Bulgarian Socialist Party. It's the successor of the Bulgarian Communist Party and was in power for 4 years from 2005. It saw Bulgaria join the European Union in 2007. Other parties include the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, or the MRF, which represents Bulgaria's ethnic Turkish minority. And there's the centrist Bulgaria of the Citizens, led by former European Commissioner Meglena Kuneva. Let's bring in our guests. In Sofia, Ivan Bedrov, a political analyst and journalist. In Istanbul, Dimitar Bechev, a senior policy fellow and head of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Also joining us from Sofia is Vladimir Korolev, a Bulgarian economist. A first question to you, Ivan. Didn't GERB step down in February because of those protests over living standards and corruption, and yet they've got more votes than the other parties? Yes, not enough to form a government outright, but still they look set to be the biggest party in parliament.
Yes, we have this paradox. So GERB is the winning party. They got most of the votes last night. But it looks like they're going to leave power because they need at least one partner in parliament. We have 4 political parties in the new elected parliament. This is the parliament building behind me. And GERB is in very deep isolation. So all the 3 leaders of the other political parties declared that they will not negotiate at all with Mr. Borisov, the leader of GERB. So it looks like GERB is #1, but they're going to leave power. And the talks between the other parties, the other 3 parties, I think they have begun already.
Dimitar, the stage looks set for a power struggle in Bulgaria. Do you think we could see a political stalemate there?
Yes, I think we are heading for months of horse trading and back and forth. And we've seen that before. That was the situation in 2005 when the result of the elections was inconclusive. And forming a coalition will not be an easy task by any means. It will require a very skillful political operator. There might be a need to put under one roof the nationalist Ataka, together with the Movement of Rights and Freedoms representing Turks and Muslims. And these have been 2 antagonistic parties. It's not impossible to pull it off and place them in the same basket, but it won't be, as I said, an easy task to fulfill, by no means.
Vladimir, who do you see coming out on top in this power struggle?
I think there are 2 options. One is a tri-party or actually 2-party coalition, because it's still not clear the final elections. The final election results will be announced on Thursday, and it might well be the case that only the socialists and Turkish minority party would have a little bit more than 120 seats in the parliament that would allow them to have a rather fragile majority. If that's not possible, then they'll need attack the right-wing party. And this will have, this coalition will have enough seats, but I don't think it's going to be easy to make this coalition, because on the economic front, we have three totally different pre-election campaigns and three totally different point of views. The socialists are trying to be Western European social democrats on the way to get there, with a little bit of kind of old Marxism in their pre-election program, but not a lot. The Turkish minority party has a very libertarian policies and pre-election campaign and promises, right wing. And then we have Ataka, which is calling Western investors calling Bulgaria a colony colonized by Western investors, which is unheard of. So I don't think it's going to be an easy task to have a coalition. And my view is that in case only the Turkish minority and the Socialist Party have enough seats in the parliament to have their own majority, there might be another round of extraordinary elections sometime in, I don't know, November, December this year.
Okay, let's take a closer look now at what whoever comes to power will have to deal with. Bulgaria is grappling with a huge public debt and, like other countries in Europe, rising anger over government austerity measures. As we've been saying, Bulgaria joined the European Union 6 years ago, but the Balkan state remains the bloc's poorest member. More than 22% of the population live below the poverty line, while the average Bulgarian wage, the lowest in the EU, is around 400 euros, or just over $520 a month. Official statistics put the unemployment rate at 12%, but analysts say the real figure is closer to 18%. Bulgaria is not only the poorest country in the EU, it's also one of the most corrupt. European and international surveys show that corruption is discouraging investors. Bulgaria was rated as the second most corrupt country in the EU after Greece. 1 out of every 4 Bulgarians who dealt with doctors, the police and judges in 2001 bribed them for their services. Surveys show that Bulgarians gave about 150,000 bribes to civil servants every month in 2011. And recently, Bulgaria's former agriculture minister was charged with promising a bribe of $131,700 to a senior official and for favoring a food producer. Ivan, back to you. Why is Bulgaria in such a state?
Because the last government, that maybe the previous governments, they didn't fulfill the necessary reforms. And Bulgaria was under pressure before joining the European Union in 2007, and certain reforms were done. But once we got in the club, once Bulgaria became a member of the European Union, the pressure stopped and reform stopped. And after that, the whole Europe entered into a recession, and Bulgaria is part of it. So the unemployment has doubled since the beginning of the mandate of the last government, of Mr. Borisov's government. And they were not successful in dealing with unemployment, with investments and poverty.
You've also described the previous government as being a mafia style of government. Dimitar, do you agree with Ivan that Bulgaria is essentially a mafia? A state, an EU official who handles East Europe says you're dealing with a Wild West country. Do you share that view?
I think media are prone to exaggerate and to come up with such labels. I think Bulgaria does have a problem with crime, organized crime and corruption, but calling it a mafia state would be a bit too much. Now, it has to be said that the previous prime minister, his background, especially in the 1990s, has its shady sides. So that kind of accentuates this problem. But state capture has been a problem throughout the region, not just in Bulgaria, let's put it that way. And vested interests have blocked reforms across the EU. We've seen a lot of problems in Southern Europe. And for all its ills, it must be said that Bulgaria has remained fiscally stable to the extent that it as being portrayed as the previous government as an example. I think that was a bit of exaggeration. But it's certainly the case that some reforms and some measures have gone the right direction. And Bulgaria has to be seen in the larger context as well. Up until 2008, it was growing because of the general trend across the EU, across Europe. But the crisis hit very hard the Balkan periphery. And I'm not just talking about Bulgaria, I'm talking a number of countries. So we have our institutional problems. EU has been the response in many ways, but being part of the bigger whole has created some vulnerabilities that have accentuated the deep-seated problems in the country.
Vladimir, who do you think can fix some of Bulgaria's problems?
First, I want to make a comment agreeing with Dimitar that it's an over-exaggeration to call Bulgaria a mafia state. And both Transparency International and Heritage Foundation indexes of corruption show that Bulgaria is on the level of corruption, as you rightly said, Greece, but also Hungary, Romania, and other less developed countries in EU are at about the same level. I'm not very optimistic that if this parliament forms a government, something good is going to come out of it for one very simple reason. As I said a little bit earlier today, they have totally different economic programs and points of view. The socialists promise to do, as they call it, a left swing, but I don't think that's the case. That's going to be a good case for Bulgaria. By the way, in Bulgaria, it might sound strange for your audience, but we didn't have austerity because in every year since 1998, every subsequent budget, state budget, is larger than the previous year's budget, and that's true also for our last budget. Actually, unemployment in Bulgaria is at a much lower level than compared to other countries, not only neighboring Greece. And I believe that most of the problems in Bulgaria stem from the facts which actually Ivan Bedrov said, that reforms were stopped, or at least the pace was not good enough in some very important sectors. For example, the pension reform was stopped. The other areas of social security as well. The healthcare reform was not developed properly. And also there was a lot of populism on the streets. For example, one of the party which is in the parliament was running on a campaign saying that they will triple both the minimum pension and the minimum salary, and that they will ask all foreign companies in Bulgaria to start paying the same level of salaries which are being paid in Brussels or London, which is absolutely not possible from economic point of view because the labor productivity in Bulgaria is far way below the labor productivities in those two capitals. So a lot of people which actually voted for both the Socialist Party but also for Ataka thought that out of the blue something really nice will happen and they will not have to work harder but just wait for somebody to come back and to come to Bulgaria and make their life better. That's not going to happen. And therefore I'm going to reiterate again that I expect a very short lifespan of this new government, if at all a new government is set up.
Ivan, what do you think is the way forward? How much of the problem has to do with no rule of law and no political will to stop the corruption and to stop organized crime in the country?
So, in order to stop organized crime or fight corruption, we need a stable government with clear political support. But what we are facing right now, I think, is instability, because even the socialist and the party of the Turkish minority succeed in forming a government, they would have a very tiny majority. And European Union will not be happy if the nationalistic party becomes part of the government. So we are facing instability, and instability means more problems, I think.
And Dimitar, what about the EU? Can Bulgaria rely on the EU at all, or is it on its own to try and fix these problems?
Well, there's something essential about the relationship between the EU and Bulgaria. For a long time, we tend to look at Brussels for answers to our own ills. In other words, citizens have long trusted more Brussels institutions than they trust their own elites. And Parliament in Sofia is much more unpopular than the European Commission, which is not elected. which speaks volumes about the kind of crisis of legitimacy that we're suffering from and that propelled the protests last February. How long Brussels is going to be able to fulfill this role, I don't know. I mean, certainly there is no change of hearts with the citizens, because if you look at the latest Eurobarometer, you see a pretty stable majority of people who believe that EU membership is a good thing. And their underlining belief, essentially, is that EU is there to be a corrective for all the ills and all the disadvantages of our own democratic system. Of course, there will be some fringe parties trying to exploit the Eurosceptic message that Bulgaria is suffering from what was it called colonization, foreign imposition, and what have you. But it's a minority view, this fight. It might not be the case in the years to come. And certainly, I mean, there's one thing to be said, that at the end of the day, solutions to the problems have to be sought in Sofia. EU is not going to reform the health sector. It's not going to do anything about pensions that Vladimir mentioned. And the list goes on and on. But for a small, peripheral and poor member state as Bulgaria, this external support is essential. Without money from Brussels, we would be in recession. It's a fact of life everybody's aware of in Sofia. So there is no end of the affair between Sofia and Brussels.
Vladimir, is EU membership a good thing for Bulgaria?
It is absolutely a good thing, although the role of EU in the economic development of Bulgaria is a little bit over-exaggerated. Only 4%, the EU funding is only 4% of Bulgarian GDP. And we had in recent years, and not many years ago, 2003 to 2008 inclusive, we had an average GDP growth of 5% per year, which was the third largest in EU. Yes, EU is important, especially for the agriculture, for the so-called direct subsidies. Yes, EU funds is important for infrastructure, mainly for our highways. And yes, EU funding is important for some institutional building, but and some reforms. But what we have to do is actually we Bulgarians have to solve the mess we are in. And again, it might sound simple, but we have to work more, we have to work harder, we have to work more efficient, and we have to save more. It's as simple as this, and I know it's not easy to say that you have to save more, for example, given the low salaries that you just mentioned, but actually the Bulgarians are doing that, and if you look at the level of savings during the past 3 years, during the crisis, private savings have increased enormously. So I'm going to get back to my major point is that I'm not an optimist that A, there will be a Towa government now, and B, that this government, if formed, is going to do a good job. And ironically, it might well be the case that the caretaker government will be more than a few months in power. And if that happens, and if the president increases the mandate of this caretaker government, which until now was only to prepare the preliminary election, and increases the mandate to do until the next preliminary election some reforms, I think they can do it, because most of the members, if not all of the key ministers, are technocrats. They are not going to run for elections, and actually they are not short-term oriented because they are not looking for votes. They are looking for basically expanding the good lines in their CVs, and they really can do reform if they stay in power for a few more months.
Ivan, as Vladimir said, so much uncertainty ahead for Bulgaria. When Bulgaria joined the EU in 2007, there was a lot of optimism, wasn't there, about what EU membership would bring. Have those hopes faded, and do Bulgarians blame their own politicians for the state that the country is in?
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, when Bulgaria joined the European Union, the number of people who were in support of that joining were much more than they are today. But still today, the majority of Bulgarians want Bulgaria to be part of the European Union and go that way. So as my colleague said, the problems are to be solved here in Sofia. And that's why we need stability and clear responsibility. And if this government is the government that is to be formed, if it has too short life, after that we may go to new elections, and I think this is not so pessimistic, because the elections is democracy. Democracy means stability, I think.
And Dimitar, the political struggle in Bulgaria could go on for a while, couldn't it? Meanwhile, what is this political uncertainty doing to Bulgaria?
Well, the country's in a standstill because much of the reform agenda is not implemented. Although it must be said that the caretaker government, beyond its obvious task of organizing elections, is actually doing something really important, which is again to do with Brussels negotiating the next multi-annual framework over the next 7 years. Even if we have a government formed in the weeks to come, 90% of the job would have been done by the caretaker cabinet. So they have enormous power on their hands to set up the important infrastructure projects to guide development in the next period. I mean, there's less money now because of austerity implemented at the EU level, not just at the national level, which means more pressure for them to come up with good quality projects which will have a multiplier effect on the economy. And I do agree with Vladimir. I mean, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to Brussels money. Of course, they can be the backbone of growth because they can leverage investment from the private sector, but they can also crowd off more productive finance and distort institutions and create perverse incentives. Now, Bulgaria has had another problem with this money in the sense that capacity was lacking at various levels of administration to absorb, to use the EU lingo, the money in a proper way. Our absorption levels are still lagging behind the old member states and even the Central Europeans. But yeah, I mean, the caretaker government will have a bit more life, and which will be an important period of time not to be wasted, and I hope they'll do their job decently. But let's wait and see.
Vladimir, a last question to you. If the politicians can get their act together and form a coalition, do you see much changing in Bulgaria, new government or not?
Frankly not, because I don't see a stable coalition unless one of the two parties of the coalition, the socialists or the Turkish minority party, really changed their mind on what they were preaching and saying during the pre-election campaign. And if the socialists change their mind, and they've done it once, about what, 8 years ago, when they were chairing a tri-party government, but actually this tri-party government instituted pro-business and right-wing reforms rather than socialist reform. Yeah, I see a kind of sunnier sky for Bulgaria, but so far the socialists, and actually yesterday in the press conference they said no. If we form a government, we're going to do a left swing, whatever they might mean by that.
Okay, Ivan, before we go, your outlook for Bulgaria going forward, please.
Well, we're waiting for the negotiations to start. As far as I know, they have already started, and I think my forecast is that Bulgaria is going to have a new government in that parliament before going to eventually new elections. So the question is how long is going to be that government on power, and what will they do? The plan of the socialists is to have a so-called program government, pragmatic government led by the former finance minister, who is in favor of financial stability. So in terms of financial stability, we don't have, yeah, it sounds okay. But what else are they going to do? It's still to hear that.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to all our guests in Sofia, Ivan Bedrov, in Istanbul, Dimitar Bechev, and also in Sofia, Vladimir Korolev. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you've any feedback, do email us your thoughts to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye for now.